GearNetwork.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I believe it's a big challenge for our building to keep things in perspective and to, if we're going to get addicted to anything, let's get addicted to the process.
And with that, we welcome you to Trust the Podcast, powered by Better Live Than Dead and the Gear Radio Network. This is episode 127.
Episode 127, people. Sorry. I'm in a giggling mood because of some shenanigans.
For those at home who don't, for those at home who don't get the special edition of the podcast, I hit record and John ripped a very loud fart and then ever so graciously says, "Excuse me, I'm sorry." And there was just something about it that was incredible.
I'm sorry. It traditionally happens. It's like a Trust the Podcast tradition where it's just smut from the word go in the season finale. After the last,
I haven't even gotten to that point yet. I was going to say, this is unfortunately the season finale of Trust the Podcast, but the Buffalo Bills versus Cincinnati Bengals. I'll give John a second to catch his breath.
I'm sorry. If in case it wasn't clear, I love to fart. It's hilarious to me still.
It is one of John's favorite things to do. I would say it's right up there. You can hear us on betterlivethandead.com, gearnetwork.com, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Make sure to hit that subscribe button as well to stay up to date on the latest podcast. I am and always will be Ryan Wolfe at WolfeBLTD. John, my co-host at I am JC Money.
Hi, buddy.
John, we all know how you're doing.
I tell you what, if there was a Mount Rushmore of farting, I'd be on there 4 times.
That's fair. That's a very fair way to put it. Yeah. I believe me, I've had many a serious conversation where John's like, "Hold on, something just came up." And it just breaks the tension, you know. I'm used to it by now. That's why I'm not laughing, because this is normal behavior. That should tell everybody before we jump into the podcast, that should tell you how normal of a behavior this is from John, that it doesn't faze me.
You know, I remember my mother telling me at 12 or 13 years old, and Mom, if you're listening, I don't mean to give up the boss on you, but you genuinely did say this. She's, one day you're going to find out that farts are not funny. And still
waiting for it.
30 years later, I'm still waiting on that day. It's just still hilarious to me today as it was back then.
Well, hey, a good transition. Speaking of things that aren't funny, the Buffalo Bills season comes to an end with a very lifeless, disappointing 27-10 loss to the Cincinnati Bengals in the division playoffs. Buffalo's season ends at 14-4, which includes a 1-1 record in the postseason. Now, I'm going to jump right into the 3 big things here, just simply because we've got a lot to talk about. So before we get to that, 3 big things are brought to you by puckluck.com, your one-stop resource for all of your National Hockey League sports betting action. The Sabres are good, so get some money on some Sabres games. Puckluck.com provides win percentages and score projections for each and every National Hockey League game to tilt the ice in your favor. Not sure what to bet or just in a rut? Puckluck also provides expert picks to get the puck bouncing your way. Please note, Puckluck.com is no way affiliated with the National Hockey League. It's teams or the NHLPA. Puckluck.com provides data related to gambling and cannot guarantee the success of any suggested or related wagers. As always, please gamble responsibly. Now, complete transparency here. It is Thursday after the Bills' season-ending loss on Sunday. And while, yes, life, work, and personal has been very busy for the both of us, John and I normally make a point to make time for the podcast. And as this week has gone on and things have kind of developed and settled in, and we've gotten essentially the all clear that we're good to go, and like, hey, everything, it is what it is. There will be another season, essentially, whatever. Mm-hmm. Just tried to give it time, just let things sit, because honestly, I didn't want to come on the podcast. And I mean, John, I try. I mean, we've been doing this for 127 episodes. I try not to come on here and just spout off at the mouth and say dumb things just to get people to tune in. I wasn't expecting.
Usually that's what I'm for.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that to happen, but I just wanted to be careful and say, let me get, I wasn't super emotional about the game. I mean, it sucks, but, you move on. But you just want to give it some time, let some things develop, let them have locker clean out day, because then we get some storylines, which we'll talk about here shortly. But during the week, John had a wonderful idea. So the first of the three big things this week, we're calling it John's Open segment. John, I give you the floor.
Okay, thank you so much. And really, this is going to kind of be the JC Money style type interview, because I Ryan, you are the of the Bills fans that I know very closely. Like, you are right up there, Mount Rushmore of Bills fans. It's my Uncle Tim, it's my buddy Jermaine, and then you're right there, and then probably my fart is the fourth.
Some
one.
third all time,
maybe, I don't know, but you love you some Buffalo Bills, and you've been, for as long as I've known you, that many years.
How long have you known me for?
Oh, that many years. I'd say I started wrestling in 2000. I met you 02. 21 years.
21 years. Our friendship can drink. How cute.
Our friendship can drink.
Our friendship needs a drink after this game.
Well, indeed. But I'm genuinely very curious, just from the eyes of a Bills fan, what is it that I'm missing? So I'd like to ask you, as the resident Bills fan here, not just taking off the host hat. I'm interviewing you as a Bills fan. Of our 21 years as friends, there was a large portion of that where the team was not doing very well. And now we have a stretch of time, fully documented on this podcast feed, by the way, where the Bills are constantly referenced as Super Bowl favorites, or, the team to beat, or, the AFC East powerhouse kind of thing. And then I see things like, what happened this game when they lost to Cincinnati. And I've got people saying, Bills fans, they call themselves Bills Mafia. They're talking about fire McDermott, fire this, start over, this. And I'm like, do you not remember where you were for 17 years? So Ryan, please help me understand Bills Mafia here. I get the disappointment in losing, but going completely to the proverbial deep end of sports fandom regarding a Buffalo Bills team whom, just 5 short years ago, or 5 long years ago, was not very good. Help me understand, why does this fan base consistently do this? Why do they do this to their team?
I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the newly developed "what have you done for me lately" thought process. I mean, it's with sports, it's very difficult to sit there and there are certain teams who can get away with it. You look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, where the players who are playing today had nothing to do, were not even alive, were not even a thought the last time the Leafs won the playoffs, or won the Stanley Cup, I'm sorry. But they have to shoulder that burden. Or the New York Yankees, the same thing. Well, they've only won once in the 21st century, or whatever, And you just say to yourself, I get that point. Or it's like the Red Sox with the 86-year drought. I get the point, but that's not on them. That's not something that this team needs to shoulder. This Buffalo Bills team, they try their best to represent the history of the team. They understand where the team has come from, but that's not their responsibility. That's not their story. But because Bills fans are so dedicated and borderline crazy, I mean, we all know that you got to be to sit outside for 4 hours on a Sunday, tailgate for 6, 7, 8 more hours before the game, just to go watch grown men play football, play a sport. Which
right. So I get that.
I think a lot of the problem ultimately ends up being, and I've got some notes later on that a couple things I want to touch on, but I think a lot of it just has to do with the expectation, is that people are expecting a lot from this team and refuse to settle for anything less, which it really ultimately is a blessing and a curse, because it's great that you're able to hold your sports franchise accountable, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's sitting back here and saying, oh, well, the Bills went 13-3, won the AFC East, were better than they were last year, arguably, that the season's a failure. I mean, I know the saying, and I've been thinking about this all week ever since you said you wanted to interview me, of like that cliched line of, well, they didn't win the championship, so the season's a failure. But I struggle with that one, because I mean, yes, in hindsight, like, if you don't win the championship of any sporting event or any sports league, like, that's the reason why you're playing. You're not just playing to collect stats and accolades and get paid. Like, you want to be the best of the best. But I don't necessarily think that this season's been a failure. It's just for me brought up a lot more questions than answers, which are some things I do want to bring up later in the podcast.
Right. And I get that. And I get the more questions than answers, right? Like, if you're coming objectively questioning, where do we go from here? What is needed to take the next step for the Buffalo Bills? Like, that's one thing, but to go just completely crazy and say things like fire McDermott and fire Leslie Frazier, and the process isn't working, we have to start over. And I'm thinking here, like, dude, the last 4 years you've had 10 or more wins, right? The last 4 years, the Buffalo Bills have had 10 or more wins. 3 of those last 4, they finished first and won the division. I mean, you have to go all the way back to 98 and 99 for consecutive double-digit win seasons for this franchise. And McDermott and company have done that in now 4 straight years. So it's hard for me as a sympathizer. We always say Bills Mafia's favorite Jets fan, right? It's no secret. Opposite the podcast, I root for the New York Jets, and I root for the Buffalo Bills when inevitably the Jets are eliminated by week 4. Great. But as someone that isn't just, I guess, that isn't a Buffalo Bills first, I don't know. I've just coming from me, man. If the New York Jets got 1 10-win season, I'd be thrilled.
Well, that's what I was going to say too. Like, watching from your perspective of the Jets. I mean, this year the Jets were much better, but from your perspective, you look at it and you wonder to yourself, like, what the hell is going on? I mean, it seems to me a lot of the problem ends up being, which is something we'll talk about here shortly, but it's a lot of the same issues that they're seeing in Buffalo with offensive inefficiency, defensive breakdowns. I mean, I really can't hang a lot of this on Josh Allen, but Josh Allen had a lot of trouble this year with things like throwing touchdowns in the red zone, which is something he historically has never struggled with. So you see stuff like that and you're like, okay, the answer is right in front of you. And despite the fact that we've both, I mean, I've obviously a lot more than you have been critical of the Buffalo Bills more often than not, because I think expectations are higher and it's harder to adjust when you're always winning. And I'm not trying to make an excuse here, but if you find ways to win games, I feel like adjustments come harder because you don't want to change what got you there.
Right.
So then you get to a point where you may not match up well with a team, but you're like, this is what got us here, so this is what we're going to stick with. And I think that's an overall failure of the team as a whole. But by no means is it time to blow everything up, because again, they're putting themselves in the best position to succeed. It just so happens to suck that right now Josh Allen is playing at the same time as Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow, because again, the Bengals have rebuilt very well. The Chiefs retool very well. And that's something the Buffalo Bills are going to have to do. I think a lot of pressure is going to be put on the Buffalo Bills this offseason. I mean, Brandon Beane has already even said it. There's no Von Miller move coming this offseason. The Buffalo Bills are above the salary cap, have to restructure, maybe cut some players to get back under the salary cap. They're probably going to go out and look on the scrap heap for veterans who are on the back nine of their career, players looking to reinvent themselves, maybe a player like a system-specific player, like, hey, this guy's a slot receiver, that'll be great. Or, hey, this guy's a nickel safety. Great. We'll get him for cheap. But there's not going to be any huge moves out there where they're going out and signing a Von Miller, just much like Brandon Beane said.
Right.
Because next year, that's when Josh Allen's contract extension kicks in. So you're going to start paying Josh Allen $45 million a year. And it's like, that's why they always say in the league, no more true than it is now, like with the Bengals. How are the Bengals continually so good and continue to be so good? I mean, they've got young, cheap, cost-effective talent in Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, among other players. But those players are still on their rookie deals. So they can go out and load up in other positions to make sure that they're as good as possible, where the Buffalo Bills are getting to the point where they've run away from, they don't have that luxury anymore because they're paying Stephon Diggs big money. They're paying Josh Allen big money. So you're trying to get to the point where you say to yourself, okay, now that they have to get more creative, is this the group to do it?
I think, I think it's the group to do it. With time comes, obviously the cohesiveness, and the Bills are cohesive. I don't know. I look at this season completely differently for the Buffalo Bills. I get the financial aspect of it. And you mentioned the Cincinnati Bengals and how, they have key, good, key, young, prime players playing important positions in their rookie deals. I mean, that was kind of like what happened with Kansas City and Mahomes. And I mean, you do see them now, but they're losing Tyreek Hill this year. It's kind of the fallout of that and what happened. So I get and I understand that, but nobody was crying for Andy Reid to lose his job when they lost to Cincinnati last year. They didn't cry for him to lose his job when he lost the Super Bowl the year before to the Buccaneers. I mean, like, I guess what I really want to know is, like, why do a certain group of Buffalo Bills fans, having known that they've been for the majority of their lives at the bottom of the barrel, why? I guess, what is it going to take to get them to understand that what the NFL football gods giveth, they can take it away? See the New York Jets, for example.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, we'll talk about Leslie Frazier and Ken Dorsey and Sean McDermott a little more, like I said, later on. But I think a lot of it has to do with just, you wonder if, like I said, are these the guys to get the job done? Essentially, can this coaching staff get this team over the hump? Because now it's like the Buffalo Bills are facing adversity for the first time in a long time, because they've been good for quite a while.
Right.
And what's the adversity? It's the Kansas City Chiefs and it's the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bills have beaten the Chiefs in the regular season, but the Bills have not beaten the Chiefs in the playoffs. The Bills have not beaten the Bengals in the playoffs. So how do you get over that hump? So it's not so much a situation where you build your team to be a Kansas City Chiefs beater or a Cincinnati Bengals beater, but you have to find out ways to slow them down to give yourself a chance to win and to find ways to stop them. Because as we saw on Sunday, and we're not really going to talk much about the game because there's not really much to talk about. The Bengals played very well. The Bills were absolutely lifeless. And I certainly think the situation ultimately is like, it's like what happened in the Super Bowl with the Buccaneers and Chiefs. How do you slow down Patrick Mahomes? You keep him in the pocket, you put pressure on him. Teams start doing that. Mahomes is still successful. Don't get me wrong, because the Chiefs are one of the best teams in the league. But it's much like with the Bengals. It's okay. Their defensive coordinator is shutting down teams at an astounding pace. Yes. How do you get around that? How do you adjust to that defense? How do you break it down so you can put more than 10 points up on the board? Because I can't see you holding the Bengals, who have been streaking nonetheless, because they've been very, very, very hot lately. For the past, I think, 2 or 3 months. You're not holding them to 10 points. Like, that's not happening.
Right. Absolutely. No, I agree, and I get that.
I'll have more details later on in the podcast. I just don't want to give them away now, because then we're not going to have much of a podcast.
Right, for sure. I think in closing, just what I'm going to offer is, again, you made the you made the reference of Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs at that Super Bowl against Brady and the Bucks. And yeah, how do you take care of, how do you eliminate Patrick Mahomes? You could put pressure on him, But what really did it more for Mahomes, I think, that more than anything in that Super Bowl was the fact that they were down to, bums and, XFLers and USFLers at playing the offensive line, trying to protect him. I mean, the guy was running for his life, and he didn't have any of his people there. The injuries mounted for Kansas City that year. And I think that's the bigger story for Buffalo this year. I think that was their biggest hindrance, even though they finished at 13-3, which is obviously fantastic and would have been good enough for first place had the home field had the situation with DeMar Hamlin not happened. But a large portion of this season, you could really attribute a lot of it to injuries and losing big key players that may have been signed or were signed for the moment that they were ultimately not there for because of injury.
And I think a lot of it too, and I mean, there's no way to guarantee this because I don't actually, I should probably reword that. I've been thinking a lot about this all week. What if the Buffalo Bills had played that Monday Night Football against the Bengals or football game against the Bengals? Would they have a better chance of beating them on Sunday? I don't think so. I think hands down, Cincinnati hands down has had. They, for some reason, and I guess I don't understand. Excuse me, I don't understand this, but then again, the answer is probably right in front of me. They seem to play their best football lately, the past couple of years, when the spotlight is the brightest. And
yes,
I can't remember the last time I've seen a quarterback as poised as Joe Burrow. Even mentioning, like, he reminds me, his poise reminds me a lot of Tom Brady, where he's completely unflappable. Completely unflappable.
Yep.
And I mean,
100%.
Patrick Mahomes does that, but I feel like, again, when we talked about it before, what makes an elite quarterback in the league? You have to have one thing that you're better than everybody else at. And I think for Joe Burrow, his poise makes him an elite quarterback because
absolutely
he is so calm, so cool and collected. The guy was missing 3 out of 5 offensive line starters against the Buffalo Bills. Didn't phase him. So I think that it just, even though the Bills have their own elite quarterback, I think we're finding out, and I'm going to talk about this in just a minute, we're finding out very quickly that there are still some extra pieces the Buffalo Bills need to add to their offense to not only take the pressure off of Josh Allen, but to give him some more weapons.
I feel like we're on the precipice, if not already there, on a new era of good, solid, fundamental quarterback battles. Like it may not be, like I said in the beginning of the season, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills and then 30 other teams. Like Cincinnati pretty much stamped themselves as being one of those, in that upper echelon to be mentioned with those two consistently.
And looking at it too here, I'll just roll over to our second of the 3 big things, which is just kind of a collection of thoughts. There's no real title here. First off, and we'll talk about these as we run them down, but the offense was shut down. Cincinnati easily handled Buffalo's offense and clearly turned it into a one-dimensional crapshoot. While Cincinnati's defense has been known to do this, especially the last 2 postseasons, Buffalo's one-dimensional offensive issues have been noted. And I mean, it was even seen by Stephon Diggs, who was visibly upset after the game, and who can blame him? I mean, he tweeted, quote, "Want me to be okay with losing? Nah. Want me to be okay with our level of play when it's not up to standard? Nah. It's easy to criticize my reaction more than the result." And again,
he's spitting facts there.
You cannot blame him. What has Buffalo done, John, to get Diggs help, to get him more open? I mean, Gabe Davis took a step this year. Don't get me wrong. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But not a big enough one where you can rule out looking for a solidified wide receiver 2.
Absolutely. He didn't make the difference. He didn't make the leap that you and I both thought that he might have. And I think that other opposing defenses figured that out and understood that, and that's why they were able to zone in more on Steph Diggs than perhaps they might have had. Oh my God, brain fart here. Gabe Davis, had Gabe Davis been lived up to the potential that we thought he would have coming into this season. So
had another thought pop up.
That's a very big part of that.
Had another thought pop up. Sorry, there. Had another thought pop up before I mentioned this next point. But I remember hearing something. I can't remember what it was. It was some podcast or video I saw where they were mentioning they know exactly, opposing teams know exactly what route Gabe Davis is going to run based off how he responds as he takes off. And it's become something where it's almost like he's tipping his pitches. Could that be something? Sure. Could it be the fact that he doesn't catch the ball half the time it gets thrown to him? Also, sure. But the wide receivers were so ineffective and they were so injured that let's be real, they signed John Brown and Cole Beasley off the street, and those guys played significant roles late in the season. That's unbelievable.
Right.
And after the game,
yeah, you're right.
I was going to say, after the game, Stephon Diggs asked Isaiah McKenzie, quote, how every year it's the same thing. And that, to me, John, is the statement of the offseason. It's the same thing. Every year, it's the same thing. They lose in heartbreak fashion last year. This year, they come out completely. They almost lose to Miami. Arguments could be had if Tua was playing, whether they would have won or lost. I'm not going to have that conversation here, but
yeah, neither am I. No, I don't think that would have mattered.
They came out flat against Cincinnati. Even if they beat Cincinnati, they probably would have lost to the Chiefs because it's just. And we'll talk again. I keep saying we'll talk more about it. There's so much more left in this podcast to talk about. But another thing, Josh Allen also mentioned that his elbow injury affected his throwing motion more than was originally let on. So he said until about 2 weeks ago.
We knew that.
He said until about 2 weeks ago, John, it took him to feel better because he was throwing. He's more of a rotational thrower. He had to be more of a lateral thrower, which caused problems. Now, their surgery is not expected to take place. Rest and recovery is the key this offseason. But he's a big star in the league, and it's clear Buffalo cannot go into another season riding or dying with Josh Allen simply because teams are getting much better at game planning for that. Like, you can go a game or two, balls out Josh Allen, like do what you got to do. But that cannot be your game plan.
Right.
Because it fails. It fails every time.
It does. Well, I mean, I knew that elbow injury he was playing through it. He wasn't the same after that Jets game when that injury happened. I can't be convinced differently. He looked like he was throwing uncomfortably, unorthodox to what he's normally accustomed to. He looked like he almost had to, in a way, relearn kind of how to throw because he wanted to be out there so much. I mean, you remember they were talking about surgery, Tommy John surgery, nonetheless.
And I believe too, if someone had mentioned, even if he has to have surgery this offseason to like clean something up, he shouldn't be out. He should be back before training camp. But I would absolutely hope, because, I'm going through this with the Boston Red Sox right now. Woe is me over here. Trevor Story starts throwing in December and goes, oh, my elbow kind of hurts. And they're like, cool, we're going to go give you Tommy John surgery. So you don't want it to be July and Josh Allen comes back, goes a couple passes and goes, my arm kind of hurts. So I'm hoping that they will keep a close eye on that. But the other big thing that I wanted to mention, John, a quick point here, the defense. Leslie Frazier has been known to rely heavily on nickel packages, which was also a glaring issue to the Chiefs last season. We saw them playing, 5-10 yards off the ball, off of guys. Tyreek Hill is wide open, and you're like, okay, we're just going to do a quick, 3 yards turn. We'll toss it to you, or we'll do a slant, whatever, and you'll be open, and you'll just run with it. And it seems like, I don't know if it's a Leslie Frazier thing. I don't know if it's a personnel thing. But it doesn't seem like the Bills are built to handle an offense like the Bengals and the Chiefs possess. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The Bills have a top 5 defense in the NFL annually. They are very, very, very good in the regular season. Then when the postseason comes around and all the chips are pushed to the center of the table, it almost seems like, I don't know. I mean, this year it was probably a lot of personnel issues because there were a lot of guys who just could straight up not play.
Right.
But that's
Injuries.
not an excuse.
I mean, again, Von Miller not there. The Von Miller injury that changed. I feel that changed the trajectory of the defense.
Absolutely, because after he got hurt, they were unable to get consistent pressure, which was a problem on Sunday against the Bengals. But they're unable; they have no ability to adjust. That for me has always been the thing where it's like the Buffalo Bills defense every single year is quickly becoming the definition of insanity to me, where you're trying the same thing and expecting a different result. You know what's going to happen. It doesn't matter how good you are. Now, that's why when you start to hear people say they should fire Leslie Frazier, I think that's a little crazy. But if the Bills play another year next year where they're, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever in DVOA, and they're one of the top 5 defenses in the league, but then somehow get blown up in the playoffs, then heads might start to roll, because that's the thing. When it comes to coaching, which is going to be the next thing that I'm running over to, Sean McDermott acknowledged that the gap to Buffalo is closing. So like the Jets, the Dolphins, the Patriots, that gap is closing. And they must self-assess to not only keep pace, but to catch up with Kansas City and Cincinnati. So right now in the AFC, you're literally, if you're tearing it out, it's KC, Cincinnati above everybody, a little lower Buffalo, a little lower everybody else. So it's like we know that gap exists. Buffalo's good enough to beat everybody else, but not good enough to make that leap to end up beating Kansas City or Cincinnati. And it doesn't seem like they're very interested in changing much, which also is frustrating.
So let me ask you this. After hearing McDermott say that, and after laying everything out there like you did, and this may be jumping the gun a bit, do you think next season, because next season, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, next season is the last one at the old Ralph, right? And then I think it's 2 years they're opening the new spots.
I think it's, I don't even know. I think 2026 is the new stadium.
2026 is a new stadium. Okay. So
yeah, 2026 is the plan.
So let me ask this. You've got the new stadium opening up in a couple of years, right? You know that's going to bring in big money. Big money is going to want big product. If, after everything McDermott acknowledged and said and did, and he's obviously going to be back next year, there's no question about that. But if the Buffalo Bills do not beat the Kansas City Chiefs or Cincinnati, really, if they don't make it to the Super Bowl, do you think next year is a Super Bowl or bust year for the Buffalo Bills? And if so, is it a all right, what we're having, yes, the process is nice, it's not working though, we need to move in a different direction kind of thing? Or is it, would it be the slow kill, the slow rebuild, or something like that? Like, I'm genuinely curious. What would you think?
I think ultimately, with the amount of success that Sean McDermott has had, and I think we saw it kind of start today a little. And I'm actually gonna grab this part of the podcast and I'm going to move it up real quick so I know that I talked about it. I think we saw a little bit of it today with the announcement or the report that from Elena Getzenberg of ESPN, Bills safety coach Jim Salgado was fired on the 26th. A source told ESPN Salgado has been on McDermott's staff since 2017. From 2020 through 2021, he was a team's nickels coach. He'd moved to safeties this year. I think we're going to start seeing more of that. I don't know if more people are going to get fired. I would be shocked if Ken Dorsey didn't come back next year. I would be shocked if Leslie Frazier didn't come back next year. But we may see some more internal shifting because, again, there are big moves to be made. There are big players not coming back to Buffalo next year, and the Buffalo Bills now have to adjust and figure out how to retool on the fly on a tight budget. And the one thing that really frustrates me is it always seems like the brighter the lights get, the more difficulty Sean McDermott has. And I don't know if it's just he's getting out coached, or their game planning is poor, or they just don't have the personnel to do it. But that's the most frustrating thing to me, because essentially the Buffalo Bills were built for the playoffs. Whatever happens during the regular season, they rolled to a 13-3 record. Should have been even better than that, but they rolled to a 13-3 record with minimal trouble. Let's be real here. And they literally could have won all of the games that they were in because they lost them all by a single score or less.
Yep.
But if you're playing for the postseason, you got to show up in the postseason. And the game plan on Sunday was horrible. There's no doubt about it. And Sean McDermott did refuse to discuss any potential coaching staff changes, but he did point out a few different topics. First off, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that when they fired Rick Dennison, when he was the offensive coordinator a few years ago, McDermott said the same thing. So people are kind of hanging their hat on that. But I don't think anything big is going to come here. I don't know why my cat is chewing on an outlet. Hey.
Well, it's a cat, and cats do.
She's chewing on a plug to get my attention. It's like, you're going to die if you keep chewing on that. Whatever.
It reminds me of that scene in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, the cat with a Christmas tree.
Yep.
What's that smell? Fried pussycat.
Stop.
Oh,
okay, so McDermott agreed with the notion that the offense slowed down as the year went on, which whose fault is that? Would be the offensive coordinator. He also mentioned directly Nyheim Hines being more involved in the offense by commenting on his playing time. Quote, "It's something that I thought we could have done a better job with." You acquired Nyheim Hines and you didn't integrate him into the offense. Whose fault is that? Now, yes, that can be Ken Dorsey's fault, but you're the head coach.
Right. Yes.
Ken Dorsey's not saying I'm
true.
refusing to play him. So it's like a little falls on Dorsey, a little falls on McDermott. But again, another thing, GM Brandon Bean referred to Sunday's loss as a, quote, blowout, fair, and that they, quote, have to be careful about looking at one game and making it bigger than it is as far as who they are. But again, who they are, John, is a team who can't beat Kansas City and Cincinnati. And they just so happen to be the two teams in your way if you want to win or if you want to even make the Super Bowl, let alone win it.
Correct.
You got to get past those two teams. And if you can't get past those two teams, that's who you are. And John, you know what I'm asking for.
What are you?
They are who we thought they were.
Oh, yes.
That's why
Denny Green.
Damn field.
They are who we thought they were. We let them off the hook.
Yep, precisely.
My Denny Green, the late Denny Green.
Now I will loosen up a little. I will take a breath. There's no doubt about it, John. All of the coaching problems, not really all the coaching problems, but the lapses in coaching or the ineffective play, whatever. But it was crystal clear. The season had finally caught up with these guys. Offensive lineman Roger Saffold commented after the game, which that's another thought I wanted to bring up really fast too. The Buffalo Bills, if they're going to go out and sign veterans, they need to make sure that they're not going to completely whiff. And Roger Saffold was not a great pickup for the Bills this year. But I mean, you win some, you lose some. But those are the kind of deals where you kind of have to really do a good job of making sure you nail it. But I digress. Saffold commented after the game, quote, "Guys were exhausted during the week and our coaches did the best they could to try to modify the week, but there was just uncharacteristic things that were kind of happening. I kind of have to put that into effect and not as an excuse, just this team has been fighting for so long and fighting through all of this adversity. You almost run out of gas at some point." I couldn't say it any better myself.
I absolutely agree. I mean, you think, what we talked about again, and it's just a case of point, the city of Buffalo in general, not just the Bills, but the city of Buffalo in general, the emotional, connection that the people have to one another and have to that community, to go through all of the things they went through in 2022. And then you top it off with the Damar Hamlin injury. And yes, while we're happy he's recovered and everything, there was a brief period of time where he was not with us on the field, and the players had to see that, and they had to live through that, and they had to be a part of that, and that had to be the thought process, in their mind, and it had to be the storyline and everything like that. And it's mentally draining and taxing. And the two games afterward was great vibes. Do it for DeMar and all and everything, but I mean, at some point, the injuries were going to catch up with them, and just the emotional drain of not only what happened with Damar Hamlin, but even though they're just a football team, they are the identity of that city. They are the face of that city. Whenever there is if there's any sort of big major news in Buffalo, like everybody looks to the Buffalo Bills to get their thoughts on everything. And they had to navigate through all that, and they had to speak to all that. And they did all the events and charities and different things to kind of help. I mean, it just was a very, very rough year in general for Western New York as a whole, not just the football team. So yeah, that is at some point you are going to run out of gas, and perhaps that was them simply running out of gas. I don't know if it was the coaching. I don't know if it was this, that, or the other thing. I personally don't think it's anything more than just that. They ran out of gas.
They
belted out 8 straight, right?
Yeah, they lost Micah Hyde. They lost Micah Hyde in week 2, Jamison Crowder week 4, Von Miller in week 12, and suffered a presumed large of emotional distress and mental distress, I would presume, as well, with Damar Hamlin's on-field injury and recovery, among other things. But
for the record, you conspiracy theory morons out there that think that for some reason it's a body double, seriously, put the freaking phone down and go to the library. And
I mean, these are probably the same people who think that the COVID vaccine gives you like the shakes or something,
Yeah, I don't know. I saw that on there, and then the fact that if someone brought it up to Josh Allen, and Josh Allen was just like, I can't even believe I have to address this stupid.
The last thing that I'm going to say on this is that if we did a Venn diagram of people who think Damar Hamlin's actually dead and it's a body double, people who think the COVID vaccine gives you the shakes, and people who thought the 2020 election was stolen, the Venn diagram would just be a circle.
Very valid point.
Thank you.
Very valid point.
Now, the one thing, we don't want to get too political here. God forbid we make fun of you stupid Donald Trump fans. Brandon Beane, I think, had the most astute point, if that's even the right way to use the word. I don't know. I'm really tired. He had the best point, I think, of all. And this is where I want to leave it before we move on to our final of the 3 big things, which we're going to wrap up the season. We're going to talk about some cool stuff and whatever. Okay. Brandon Beane said, quote, I would say at the end of the season that we never put together. I don't have the answer for you. We never put together a complete game. If you look back at some of the games we had early in the year, we had stretches in games, but we never, from kickoff to the final buzzer, we were finding a way. That's where I give a lot of credit to this team. It wasn't always the offense. It wasn't always the defense. Nyheim Hines in the Patriots game. Unfortunately, we were not playing our best football in the end.
Right.
That's that.
That's what it is. Yeah, absolutely.
But then again, if you start to open the can of worms, why can't you put a full game together? And that's where you try to figure it out. But let's move down the stats. Third of the 3 big things here. Running down the offensive stats and wrapping up the defense. Head coach Sean McDermott named a finalist for the NFL Coach of the Year for the 3rd time in his career. And quite possibly a strong candidate for Coach of the Year, just based off of how well the Bills played and how much adversity they've gone through, as we talked about. Quarterback
he absolutely is in contention for that.
Quarterback,
absolutely. Everything he had to deal with. Shoot.
Josh Allen had a 63.3 completion percentage, 4,283 passing yards. That's seventh most in the NFL. He had 35 passing touchdowns, tied for 2nd most in the league, with 14 interceptions. He also had 762 rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. Allen was named a finalist for the NFL MVP. I think that's probably going to go to Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes, but I don't know. I could be surprised. Josh Allen had 4,883 yards of total offense, 2nd most to only Patrick Mahomes, who had 5,420 total yards on offense.
That's crazy.
Running back Devin Singletary in his walk year had 819 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns with 38 receptions on 52 targets and 1 touchdown. I should have put the yardage in there, but I apparently didn't. So I'll get that for you right now. But looking at Stephon Diggs as one would, I can't get back to my outline here. 108 receptions, the 4th most in the NFL on 154 targets. He had 1,429 receiving yards, which is fifth most, and he also managed to have 11 touchdowns, and he also had one rushing attempt for -3 yards, which I saw that and went, I wonder when that happened because I don't remember that ever happening. But receiving, Devin Singletary had 280 receiving yards this season. Going back to the stats, wide receiver Gabe Davis, a poultry, is that the right word? Poultry. He's not a chicken, people. 48 receptions on 93 targets. Woof. 48 receptions on 93 targets. Yikes.
Yeah.
One more time. Ugh. 836 yards and 7 touchdown receptions. Also, tight end Dawson Knox had 48 receptions as well on 65 targets, 517 yards and 6 touchdowns. Defensively, defensive end Greg Russo tied with the team lead with 8 sacks. Von Miller, linebacker, also had 8 sacks. Safety Jordan Poyer led the team with 4 interceptions, and linebacker Tremaine Edmonds, who else, led the team with 102 combined tackles. On the special teams side of things, punter Sam Martin, 45 punts. He had 47.7 yards per punt, 42.1 net yards per punt, 16 punts downed inside the 20, and 5 touchbacks. Kicker Tyler Bass led the team and finished tied for 6th in the National Football League with 129 points. He was 48 for 50 on extra points made and 27 of 31 on field goals made. Now, John, for the final time this season, we will take a quick commercial break. I'm going to take a swig of some nice ice-cold Wawa, as my daughter would call it. And we'll have more Trusted Podcasts here on the Gear Radio Network right after this.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And we're back here on Trust the Podcast to wrap things up with our look ahead. John, it always sucks to wrap up the last podcast of the year. Kind of wish this one went a couple more weeks, but it is what it is, and we'll move forward, putting our best foot forward because we both know that we have roughly a 3 months, almost to the day, 3 months before we really need to podcast again. And even then, maybe we don't need to. We can just decide, but I digress. In free agency, Brandon Bean confirmed the need to get under the cap. Quote, we will have to do some restructures and moves. So a couple moves that could help out. Center Mitch Morse, who had some concussion problems this season, cutting him would save $5.1 million. Wide receiver Isaiah McKenzie, you'd save $2.6 million. Safety Saran Neal, you could save $2.2 million there. Quarterback Josh Allen, a likely restructure would create $21.5 million in cap space.
What would they restructure his deal to? I thought it would it's going to start, go into effect next.
I believe you can restructure. It would be a restructure after the new league year. So the contract would be in place and you would save you'd pop $10 million off the deal by just stretch. I think I didn't know this because I don't really care enough to know, but now I know is that you just stretch it over the length of the deal, the money that you restructure, and it just stretches out. So it pushes the cap to a different year, but
gotcha.
Someone much smarter with that stuff can let me know.
I get the logic behind. I get the logic. I know. I have an idea on what they're doing. Essentially, by stretching it, it could be taking a lump sum of what they are to make this year and, like you said, 10 million, 12 million, take more of that and add a few more zeros spread out over the course of the contract, equaling the same amount.
Not Bobby Bonilla, not paying him till he's 75.
No. Just within what's left of there. So if he was making 31.7 million next year and making 33.5 the year after, well, maybe this year they shave off a couple. He makes 29.7, and then next year he's making 34, and next year after that he's making 36 or whatever. That's kind of a prorated amount there. I get what it is. I'd have
to look into it a little more on Spot Track because they're the ones that have all the cool stats and everything. But I was going to say this isn't the full list of free agents for the Buffalo Bills, but these are the players that are, important, have played a big role, etc. Leading the list, linebacker Tremaine Edmonds, whom the Buffalo Bills have mentioned there is interest in bringing him back, but obviously because they had mentioned that they could use the salary cap, or not the salary cap, sorry, they could use the franchise tag, but the problem with the franchise tag being that it might be a little more difficult because he might try to rank as an edge rusher or whatever. I don't know. Either way, might be very difficult to see him back in a Bills uniform next season. Also on the list, quarterback Case Keenum, safety Jordan Poyer, who I believe has played his last down as a Buffalo Bill. Offensive lineman Roger Saffold, defensive tackle Jordan Phillips, defensive end Shaq Lawson, linebacker Tyler Matakevich, wide receiver Jamison Crowder, offensive lineman David Quessenberry, running back Tywan Jones, punter Sam Martin, running back Devin Singletary, and safety Jaquan Jones. Now, I expect guys like Jordan Phillips and Shaq Lawson, probably Tyler Matakevich, Tywan Jones, Sam Martin to re-sign with the Buffalo Bills. I know Phillips and Lawson had a career resurgence with the Buffalo Bills. Maybe they'll want to come back and continue to play in this system because it seems like it's the best system for their style of play. Right. But then again, I don't know. I certainly think that guys like Devin Singletary probably gone. That
one is I don't want to necessarily label him as a disappointment, but it's disappointing that he didn't shape up to be what we thought he was going to be a couple of years ago.
I think for the offense, the type of offense the Buffalo Bills play, he's probably not the best fit, but he might be able to find a good fit somewhere else in the league. Right. I think the talent is there. It just seemed difficult for this Bills offense to get that out of him. But then again, you also look at how the Buffalo Bills have run the offense, and it hasn't been very consistent, very good in terms of running the ball consistently or effectively at times. So, I would have to think that he can probably find success somewhere else, but it would be really nice to see Nyheim Hines get more involved in the offense next year. Obviously, not sure if it's going to be Nyheim Hines or if it's going to be James Cook starting behind Josh Allen next season. But either way, I think the Buffalo Bills will be in good hands. We can talk about that in the future. Sure. I think Jordan Poyer would be very nice to have Jordan Poyer back in Buffalo next year, but I do believe his ticket price will be a little too rich for the Bills' blood. I know, looking at the active contracts right now on SpotTrack, they have, where is Poyer? I gotta find him. I'll find him here. Maybe under free agents. That's where he would be. His market value is set at $11 million annual salary. They've got him pegged at 3 years, $33 million.
3 years, $33 million
for a 31, almost 32-year-old free safety who, despite the fact that he played through injuries and is one of the best safeties in the league, 32-year-old safety. So it's kind of,
Well, yeah, I know, but I mean, there are some teams that have 46-year-old quarterbacks, and so 32 years old now. Yes, while in the sports world traditionally it's old. I think with advancements in sports medicine and just overall awareness now, in comparison to your dad's football era, 32 is not. It is not an immediate drop off, as much as it is, especially for the elite. Look at LeBron James in the NBA. I mean, he's going to be approaching Kareem's record, and he's been playing in the league for 21 years, and he's still kind of, he's still moving, he's still taking care of his body, he's still doing things that people his age shouldn't be doing. I could see that translating into football too.
I think what it ends up being here is, for what Buffalo is trying to accomplish, their defense will, let's be real, their defense will probably take a step back next year, but they're good enough to make up for that. I mean, we've seen how this defense plays without Jordan Poyer at times. It can get scary. So obviously the Buffalo Bills are going to have to focus, whether it's through the draft, through trades, or through free agency, to shore up that back end. But if Tre'Davious White is healthy, Kaiir Elam takes a step, Von Miller's back and healthy. You've got Greg Rousseau rushing the passer. They probably need another pass rusher opposite of Greg Rousseau, but they should be able to run it back defensively with some trouble, but not complete trouble. Offensively, what I'm worried about is getting maybe in lieu of having a little bit worse of a running game or a little bit more inconsistency in the running game, focusing on getting pass protectors. So you can give Josh Allen the ability and time to throw the ball at a clean pocket.
Yes, I agree because
problem?
Yeah, it is. And now as we're starting to get into, year 7 of the process, which would be year 6 of Josh Allen. I mean, as hard as he's been running, you got to start looking to see whether or not he's going to be hanging in the pocket a little bit more and becoming more of the passer instead of the dual threat that he has been. With a run game as strong as his, eventually at some point he's going to have to, he can't rely on it anymore. He's going to slow down.
Well, and those are the big questions to ask this offseason too. Like you look at the Buffalo Bills depth chart on the offensive line, and I'm just getting it popped up here because a thought just popped into my head. You've got Deion Dawkins, who looked good at times, didn't look good at times. Roger Saffold, I don't think that he'll be back. You've got Mitch Morse at center, which the Buffalo Bills looked worse without him, but with a concussion-prone center who's 31, 32 years old, it's like, hey, is that a risk you're willing to take? Or do you go out and get a new starter, or do you go out and get solid depth there? I feel like Ryan Bates. Let me check something real quick. I don't even know what Pro Football Focus has him rated at a 61.8. So they apparently think he was fine, but also PFF can kind of not be great.
Right.
The eye test tells you that Spencer Brown took a step back in his second year, which that happens. I also think a big thing looking down the Buffalo Bills depth chart here, DeQuan Jones not playing against the Bengals. I think that was a huge loss for the Buffalo Bills. So they have to figure that out, whether it's a depth move or whatever. Again, I know Tremaine Edmonds has his haters and people who say he's not worth the price of admission, but you know what? If Tremaine Edmonds is to move on, the Buffalo Bills also will need a middle linebacker who can tackle, who can play in coverage. I mean, we know that Tremaine Edmonds can play, he can tackle. Sometimes he struggles playing in coverage, but this year he looked really good. So that's another situation where you say to yourself, is it worth the price, or is it something where they have to move on and try to go a little cheaper? Because again, at this point, much like Jordan Poyer, I think to myself, a 32-year-old Jordan Poyer at that price is not what the Bills position is right now. Right. If it were, hey, we're knocking on the door of the Super Bowl and this guy's going to be the one that's going to help us get back there, that's one thing. But I think you need to focus your efforts more on offense and make that offense incredibly difficult to stop. And whether they're able to make that happen or not is one thing, because on paper it sounds great, but can they do it? I'm not sure. But that would be my best guess, is to start that way first.
Well, yes, absolutely. Get something put together to help, make sure that there is a pocket presence for Josh Allen to hang in, but to up that running game. I mean, the running game picked up towards the end of the season. That's great, but that was kind of one of the main points that we talked about in the beginning of this season was, where's the run game? Josh Allen can't be the be all end all for the run. Like, we got to start picking up on the runs, all the Singletary talk that we were talking about earlier this season. And then they do the RBBC towards the end, and with the rushing games that they were putting up towards the end of the season, it was helping out Josh Allen and helping out the team in general, is taking a lot of pressure off. So yeah, that offensive line and really getting a solid fundamental running game behind Josh Allen, so it's not all him. Those should be the key items that they look at in the offensive side this offseason.
Now, looking ahead to some dates to watch, the new league year begins on Wednesday, March 15th at 4 p.m. The franchise and transition tags begin on February 21st and on March 7th. And the 2023 NFL Draft is April 27th to 29th in Kansas City. That will probably be the next time you hear from us, unless something crazy happens. So, John, before we wrap up, any final thoughts on the 2022 Buffalo Bills?
I will tell you, it was a very, very turbulent year. They were incredibly fun to watch. And I viewed this year a bit more objectively, I think, than I have previous years, and really found a genuine like and love for the team and the culture when they're not doing dumb things like saying fire McDermott or whatever, and going nuts. I think this season ultimately, yes, if we look at it hypothetical, and speak in hypotheticals, I still stand firm that on that schedule on paper, start to finish. I mean, even today, I look back, they could have, and had they been healthy, should have run that table, and they could have easily been unbeaten all in the regular season. But then again, we get to the point with the playoffs. How far would they have gone then? Would they have run out of gas? Those type of things, those type of questions that I guess we'll never know, but. I don't think that the 2022 Buffalo Bills. I don't think it was a success, but I also don't think it was a failure either. I feel like the season ended abruptly for them. They really should have at minimum moved on to the AFC Championship game. I feel like they were good enough to be the representation there. Maybe the situation that happened in Cincinnati had something, had a little bit to do with it, with placement and everything and just how that all worked out. But overall, I think we saw a different side of the Bills where it was very clear with the signing of Von Miller, they were going in it to win it. And maybe in so doing and not factoring in the injuries and everything else that could possibly go wrong, because we noted, you and I, early on, that they seemingly had a lot of depth, and all of that depth was kind of exhausted. So I had fun watching the team. I had fun covering the team with you. I feel like there's just something missing there, and I can't quite put my finger on exactly what it was. But I think that's probably why there is such a sting with Bills fans this year, because there really was no reason. I feel
there was a lot of hope heading. There was a lot of hope heading into the season. The Von Miller signing, I think, popped the cork on that one. I certainly
Odell Beckham teases and everything.
Yeah,
too,
I don't disagree that the Buffalo Bills, if healthy, if we're playing Madden here and turn off injuries, probably had a very good chance of winning 15 games. 16 games, so however many games, 17 games they play now.
17 now. 16 this year for them because of the unfortunate incident, but I normally think, 17.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Like I said, my brain's a little right now. Yeah. I really think that it's not a failure; it's more of a disappointment. This turns out to be the best regular season that Bills fans have seen in quite some time. Josh Allen, I mean, I'm not disappointed with Josh Allen at all. I just am wondering if this is the ceiling for him, or if there is room for improvement. Is he able to throw for 5,000 yards in a season? Is he able to throw for 40 touchdowns and not throw numerous interceptions in situations where he probably shouldn't have thrown the ball? Or is this something where you're expecting 35, 15 in, 4,500 yards of total offense, or 4,800 yards of total offense, because obviously he threw for over 4,000 yards, ran for over 700 yards, which is totally fine. That's perfectly fine. But if that's the case, you have to find ways to supplement. But with that being said, Josh Allen's also thrown for over 4,000 yards with one incredible wide receiver, a decent tight end, and a bunch of other random pieces that we're not really sure what they are yet.
Exactly. A very suspect run game, which is why we had to rely on his legs, to produce the additional rushing yards we need. I don't know if that question is going to be answered just yet.
I was just about to say
Josh Allen has hit his ceiling. I really want to see next year.
I was just about to say, I think the jury is out on this season. it's a disappointment because they didn't go further or didn't win. I mean, it's hard when the expectation is Super Bowl or bust, but you really can't. I feel like you can't go all in like that based off of one off season or one heartbreak of a game against the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, it sucked worse, I think, this year to lose to the Bengals than it did to the Chiefs last year because the expectations were so much higher, where last year it was just like, holy crap, this team is playing out of their mind.
Yeah.
With that being said, though, I think for me, the jury is still out on what this season ends up being in the grand scheme of things, because I don't think it's the beginning of the end. There's no stretch of the imagination where I think, okay, this is the straw that breaks the camel's back and they're going to start panicking and firing and moving and trading and blah, 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 whatever. I don't think that's the case. But
no,
how the Bills respond in the draft, in free agency, in trading, in whatever the situation may be, and how they perform next year, I think will determine, was this a step forward, even though they were 13-3 and lost relatively early in the playoffs? Or was this, again, just much like Josh Allen in the talk of, is it his ceiling? Is this the Bills' ceiling? We don't know. Time will tell. But that, for me, is why ultimately at the end of the season, I'm disappointed. But the jury for me is still out.
Yeah, I would say, for me as well, the jury's still out. Let's, we give it another year and see where we are. If we're right back here, I recall the season finale last year after that divisional game, lost to the Chiefs. It was different. It was a different vibe. Like, yes, they lost, and it was the loss that kind of led to the overtime change rule and all of that. But we were sitting here talking about genuinely one of the greatest professional football games we had ever seen. And we almost left that season with a renewed sense of optimism coming into this year. Like, I feel that even though there was the 13 seconds thing, there was just the slugfest that was that game in Kansas City. Like, that was a, you know what, we're here kind of statement game. And I think that carried over into the offseason with all those signings, the Von Miller signing and everything. That's why the expectations were so high. And then to get as far as we did last year in the divisional round, but then to lose in the way that we did in comparison to last year, I think that's probably why there's such a weird feeling, like, just a different vibe, I think, this year versus last year at this time, because where last year, even in spite of the 13-second thing, the Bills were putting up a slugfest. This time they just ran out of gas, and it leaves you, and that's the difference between leaving the season with renewed optimism, saying we're there, we can go toe to toe with the best, versus, oh crap, this guy's good too, this team's good too, what the hell,
And I don't think next year's a make or break either. I mean, you've got Josh Allen long term, you've got Stephon Diggs long term, you've got the core long term, but the rumblings may start to get a little louder if there's another early exit next year. And I don't think they'd blow it up and get rid of Sean McDermott, because again, you don't know what you got till it's gone. The grass ain't always greener, et cetera, et cetera. But with that being said, the expectation going into these seasons is, the Buffalo Bills aren't the Houston Texans. The Buffalo Bills are one of the top teams in the AFC, and the expectation is to make a deep playoff run. And if you don't do that, are you living up to your expectation? Are you doing your job? No. And when you don't do your job in the National Football League, we know what the NFL stands for, John. What is it?
The No Fun League?
Not for long, my man. Not for long.
Oh, yeah, that too. Sorry.
So it's okay. With that being said, again, next season they could come out and win the whole damn thing. Next season they can come out and go 10-7 and miss the playoffs. I don't think that's going to happen. But again, the situation here for me is everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the mouth. So
I think
what are the Bills going to do?
I feel like next year is going to be, I don't want to say a pendulum swing in the AFC, but I think that Miami is going to be tougher. The Jets are obviously going to be a year older with a lot of their younger players and a potential veteran quarterback coming into the play there. The Patriots, they brought Bill O'Brien back as the offensive coordinator there.
Well, we all know Tom Brady's
Matt
probably coming
Patricia
back too. Let's be real.
You think he's going back to New England?
No, man. Tom Brady's going to be the quarterback of the Raiders. Let's be real about that.
You think he's going to the Raiders?
We got to do a BLTD mock offseason where we just come up with the craziest things.
Brady to the Jets. Here you go.
No, that would be. I saw a good one today that said because everyone's connecting the dots that Rodgers is going to go to the Jets now because they've got like his old offensive line coach and his old offensive coordinator. And someone was like, "What if the Jets are really tooling up to just go acquire Jordan Love?"
That would be interesting.
Because you'd have a Green Bay quarterback with Green Bay coaches. But I think Aaron Rodgers
not with Green Bay age.
Yeah. Aaron Rodgers has played his last game as a Packer as well. I think that's a fair statement.
I do agree. I think the Jordan Love era is beginning in Green Bay. It would be interesting if that were the case, like the Jets were to pull a surprise move and get Jordan Love. I don't think that's going to happen though. I think they're going to roll with Jordan Love, and I see Aaron Rodgers somewhere else, if not in New York with all these dots being connected. Then who knows? I have no idea. I'd love to see. I'm not going to lie. I'd love to see him in New York. I've always been a fan of Aaron Rodgers. I know you're not, but I've always been a fan.
I don't have a problem with him, man.
I wanted the Jets to draft him in 04, and I was mighty pissed when they passed up on him, even though they got to Brickashaw Ferguson. Still, it's Aaron Rodgers. But then again, you never know what Aaron Rodgers might have been starting year one in New York at that time, right? Because Pennington was often injured. He could have been starting year one there. He could have been out of the league in 3 years and not had the opportunity to sit behind someone like Brett Favre. And
for Christ's sake, John, Nathan Peterman once was named the starter over Josh Allen. Anything is possible.
I do remember that.
That tweet pops up from time to time and it fills my heart.
Yes, but I did save that tweet too. Thank you for sending it to me.
Hell yeah. John, it's been an incredible pleasure having you on the podcast this year. Brayton as well, at Brayton J. Wilson when he pinch hit for John. John is at I am JC Money. I am Ryan Wolfe at Wolf BLTD. We are going to take a much needed break, some time off, some rest and relaxation. And we'll be back sometime in a few months. We're going to take some time off football. Going to enjoy the Pro Bowl, the flag football game. That should be a lot of fun.
You're going to enjoy the Pro Bowl. I'm getting geared up for the XFL, and then after the XFL is the USFL.
I thought you were going to say you were going to.
The USFL is the CFL, and then before you know it, we're back there.
Thought you were going to say you were going to enjoy a Pro Bowl, but that's
no
marijuana joke for you kids out there.
A little too late. The kids are still awake.
highbrow humor here on Trust the Podcast.
Hi, Mark Stadium.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, hi, Mark. Anyways, we're losing control here. Maybe you'll catch us sometime soon on a BLTD podcast. Like we always say, make sure to subscribe to all the podcasts on the Gear Network so you get the latest podcast as soon as they drop. John, for the last time this season, wrapping up the 2022 Buffalo Bills season. Not a failure. You know what? I'm not mad. This is what I'm putting on the gravestone of the 2022 Buffalo Bills. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. And with that being said, John, we are Trust the Podcast.
You're not.
We will catch you sometime in a few months. Talking draft, talking trades, talking free agent signings, whatever happens.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you want to see me in person, I can tell you right now, March in the Marketplace Mall for UPW. I'll either be wrestling or I'll be ring announcing, one of the two. April, I'll be in the Grease Ridge Mall with UPW, and then May, UPW 20 at a location to be determined. If you wanna hear my shenanigans, whether it is announcing people to the ring or performing in the ring myself, come check it out. Love to have you. Love to see you.
I always love it
too in the intermission.
I also love a cheap plug on the podcast. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, buddy.
With that being said, as always, thanks for tuning in. We will catch you sometime very soon. And don't get it twisted. Just because we say mean things about the Buffalo Bills doesn't mean we don't love the Buffalo Bills. So as always, go Bills.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.